So thank you all. It was lovely to share and join with you in a little orientation practice there. And we are here at our first ever coach clinic event. And so I'll share a little bit about what the event is, and then maybe we'll get a few check-ins before we get started. And then I'll share a little bit more, I suppose. So this is a space, a new event that we've set up just to create more of an open format. Like I won't have any slides today, might in the future, but I think it's unlikely. One of the things we've often found is actually some of the times that there's been the most life in an event is where there's this interaction, engagement, dialogue. And for those of you already part of our community, I'm sure that you're bringing much to share. So what you bring to this event will shape how the event unfolds, basically. So that's the format in a sense. We're going to check in with you. We've received loads of questions prior to the event. But the idea is that you're bringing various challenges that you might have in your coaching, and then I'm responding to those, and we'll be in dialogue. It's not just about my responses, but we'll be in a back and forth around that, but through the lens of body-oriented coaching and how you might bring a somatic orientation to whatever those coaching conundrums or coaching curiosities might be. And so my role is basically to kind of hold that frame, that lens of body-oriented coaching, and to help you to kind of channel whatever those curiosities that you're bringing through that lens. Like I said, we've got loads and loads of questions from before the event. I've actually tried my best because we wouldn't possibly be able to get through all of them today. So I've tried to group some by theme. And then I'd like to also make space for you to kind of bring questions that are alive for you right now in this moment, because I think that could be very rich. So that's how it'll go. Before we get started, I'd love to hear from you. Maybe we could just do a little check-in. So I invite probably the vast majority of you to share in the chat, maybe right now I'm feeling, and something in your environment that you enjoy or that feels like a support for you right now. As you were doing that orientation practice, maybe you noticed something in the environment that is particularly enjoyable, even if just a little bit, or that feels like some kind of support or resource to you in this moment. And so maybe you can just share that in the chat. And for those of you who would like to get your voices in the room, I would love to hear from some of you as well. So maybe while people are sharing in the chat, for those of you who are feeling a little bit more brave, not more, but who are feeling brave and who are feeling social or interactive or whatever it might be, I'd like to invite you to unmute now and share, what you're right now I'm feeling and something in your environment that feels enjoyable or supportive.
I can share.
Oh yeah, great. Yep.
I'm feeling slightly off balance, trying to land and get centered, and I'm thoroughly enjoying the way the sunshine is hitting the wall of the building and the balcony outside my window.
Lovely. Beautiful. Thank you, Anna. Thanks for being with us today. Your sweater or t-shirt is very on brand for us. I love that color. So thanks for coming. Anyone else want to share? I see loads coming in the chat as well. Hey, Elena, go for it. I saw you come off mute there, Elena. Did you want to jump in? No?
No, it's accident, but
Okay. Okay, cool. I'll tell you what, I'll read some of these from the chat then, because loads are coming in. So, wow, thank you, everybody. Elena's banana plant, gorgeous, lovely. Cynthia feeling weight and warmth of your pug on your lap. How fun. Kirsty, also, your dog is a resource for you now. Patricia, hearing the birds chirping outside your window, lovely. Elena, your plants and outdoor trees. And Ollie, feeling a bit tense, prep for the group session, coaching session. Prepping for a group coaching session. Cool. Maybe we can talk about that today. Beautiful tree outside your window. Lovely. Enjoy that, Ollie. And then thank you very much, Anna and Vera, Suzanne, Anna Bayer as well, and Sarah, Anita, Ildiko. Thank you all, Lottie, and everybody else who's shared in the chat. Wonderful to have you all with us. Yep. Lovely. Yeah. The nourishment of joining another Somatic School event already. Yeah, it sounds like you've been You've been getting lots of Somatic School events in there, Lottie, so good for you. Okay, cool. So let's dive in then, shall we? I thought I would so maybe just a little bit more framing, actually. So just one thing to mention then, just a little bit of what we might use in the coaching world. The term is contracting. So I think it's important to name that this is not an official supervisory space. So therefore, this event is not a substitute for coaching supervision. And so you could say that's a little bit of a disclaimer as well, that this is I'll be sharing in response through the lens of body-oriented coaching, but this is a non-advisory space. I'm certainly not recommending or suggesting that you do anything that I say. So, and also, we are at the Somatic School. This is adult learning environments as well. So we all take responsibility for what we're bringing, for the other members of the group here as well, and for, of course, the coaching work that you do out with your clients. With that in mind, speaking of your coaching work, let's try to maintain client confidentiality. Not try to, I'd like to request that you do, because of course I would imagine that is part of your contracting with your own clients. So what that might look like is no naming your clients by name, and try to avoid any specifics about their life. If you can, maybe the focus is on the challenge, your challenge as a coach, rather than their content as a client. Yeah. Does that make sense to everyone? Sound good to everyone? By show of thumbs? Show thumbs. I didn't say necessarily thumbs up. You just show me your thumb. Okay, cool, lovely. Good. That sounds good. Okay, great. And I think, let's see here. Have we got something set up for? Okay, so I think the best thing is we'll start with the questions that have come, and then we'll open it up, and then you can just simply unmute and ask your questions if you have other questions in the space, and we'll do it that way. So let's have a look and see. I want to check in as well. So Crystal, is Crystal here? Sophia here. Let's see. Okay, I want to check because if you are not, so Vera and Kirsty, Vera or Kirsty here. Hi Kirsty, great. Is Vera here? Yes. Okay, cool. Okay, all right. So these four. You four had like a similar theme to your questions. So maybe I'll just kind of give an abbreviated version. Christelle spoke about a question about folks who say they want to change but remain stuck. Tied into being hard to read because they share very little or stay very stoic. And there seems to be that it seems like they don't want to receive or be here. Yeah, they've paid to show up. So that's a curiosity from Crystal there. So similarly, Vera, you shared, what do you do? What do you track when a client keeps circling the same issue but says they want change? And a few others there, which we can come back to later from you, Vera. Sophia, client freezes and circles the issue when I try to go deep and ask, tell me more. So there's kind of a circling from Sophia as well. And then there was one more here, Kirsty. How would somatic coaching support a client who keeps circling the same issue? So at risk of being circular myself in reading all of those questions out, that seems like there's a theme there. For many of those people that I named, whether that may be Vera, Kirsty, or anyone else who I mentioned there who I didn't spot that you're here, is there anything you'd like to add to that, just to give us a bit more context, and then maybe we can jump in and start with that topic through the lens of body-oriented coaching? Any context more? No? Kirsty, anything more? Okay. Okay, so Vera and Kirsty, you both Somanauts already? Both doing the training here? No, not Kirsty, but Vera is. Yeah, okay, cool. All right, okay, so Kirsty, maybe I'll come to your question specifically here because it was almost the same as the others, but in a short sentence. How would somatic coaching support a client who keeps circling the same issue? Okay, do you know what? Before I respond to that, I'm curious. I'm going to open it up straight off from the beginning. Anyone got any thoughts on this? Because I think this could be an interesting way to do this as well. Anyone got any thoughts on this? Sharing any things from your own experience? and then I'll offer some responses of my own. So how would somatic coaching support a client who keeps circling the same issue? What are your thoughts on that in the room right now? What are people thinking about that topic?
I mean, I could share a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, for me, if I see like we're just like talking, okay, sometimes I let them talk as much as they want so that they feel like, okay, I spoke everything that I wanted. And then I offer them to go more into body, so like focusing practice, like kind of, and I realized that these type of people they actually need to very often they need to learn a bit more like how to be with their bodies, how to feel. So yeah, we would go there and we would see basically where it takes us. And sometimes I find that like they always find something useful already in that session from that experience and it moves a little bit forward them. Sometimes it takes a while and but somehow I feel like then they realize themselves like, oh, just talking actually doesn't get me anywhere. So they start wanting to go more into body and observe and yeah, they see that actually that's where the change happens. So that's my experience.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing. May I ask how I pronounce your name? So I don't.
It's Akvile Kajanowski.
Aquila.
Akvile, yeah, Akvile.
Aquila. Yeah.
So now.
Lovely. So great. Thank you for Aquila for sharing that and articulating that so beautifully. I think one of the things I heard in what you shared was that you allow the client to talk and speak and share. That's really lovely. I see you nodding, so I'm imagining that's a yes to that. That's really nice because this relates to the theme of clients circling around. All of these responses I get from each of you, I'll then tie back into that original question. But just to add to this actually connects to, is Clement Taffin in the room? There's another question from her. Clement? No? Okay. Clement had said something about, I often get intellectual analysis of what's happening and not really connecting to the body and stuff. So one of the things we say at the Somatic School is, somatics is about the notion that humans, we are integrated wholes. Yeah, we are complex living systems. All living beings are, and that includes our thinking, yeah, our analysis, as this Clement said, and our talking, as much as it includes our sensing, felt sense, our experiencing selves. Yeah. So at the Somatic School, we talk about a distinction between conceptual self-awareness and embodied self-awareness. But for now, the idea of somatics, at least from our view, is that it's an integration of all of that. So one of the things we encourage coaches not to do is not, especially when they start to bring the body into their coaching work, is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Thinking is welcome. Talking is absolutely welcome because ultimately it all comes out of our biology anyway. Where else would it come from? We are an organism, and so it's all kind of emerges out of our organism, so to speak. Strange way, but yeah, but you know what I mean. So with that in mind, what you've just named there, Agvile, is a really beautiful example of where sometimes when a client's circling something, we can let them circle for a while if we know that we have the options and the interventions, the various skills that we can use to start to invite them gently in their own time into a more embodied inquiry. Often clients' readiness to do so is enhanced by us giving them time to sort of clear some space for that. It's almost like you want to let them kind of offload a bit, depending on what state they're in, where they're at. Sometimes they're just sort of discharging through talking, essentially, and then they're sort of like, okay, cool, exactly as you said, Agve, they're ready now to kind of ready now to check in with what the body might know about this. Similarly, though, you actually point to something really beautiful as well, which is that they might even discover that all that talking hasn't really got them further along, and that maybe a different way in might help in this moment, where talking in another instant could be exactly what's needed to get some resolution. But actually for this topic, perhaps the reason they're circling is because actually talking is partial or limited in where how they're actually going to get help they need. So yeah, that's a lovely offering there, Kvile. Thank you very much for sharing. Anyone else on this question, this original question that came from Kirsty and was echoed by many others, but which is, how would somatic coaching support a client who keeps circling the same issue? Anyone else got any thoughts on this? Lottie, I see you said, I feel that this is where the first stage of establishing the want and why they chose somatic coaching, and then this gives us something to go back to if they are getting into the story, and then we can come back to the storyteller's wish to explore the somatic dimension. Yeah, lovely. Lottie, is there anything else you want to say on that before?
No, I'm just finding more and more. I mean, I'm a baby coach, but just finding more and more that first stage, however long it is so key to how it unfolds.
Yeah.
And establishing, well, they have chose body-oriented coaching. There's something in them that does want to explore that. And it's really just keeping in touch with that.
Yeah, lovely. Beautiful. So one of the things we talk about in body-oriented coaching, so, well, here's some language that the Somanauts won't have heard us say it quite like this before. This is a sneak peek of actually some things that are to come a little bit later down the line, but that you'll have access to, of course, which is a framing of, so we talk about stewardship a little bit in body-oriented coaching. How do we be good stewards to intelligent unfolding? Some of you might be like, I'm a little bit lost on that, so we can come back to that. Like Lena, Anna, Martina, I think you're also newer to the Somatic School. If anything I share you're not sure about, just drop it in the chat so we can clarify, because sometimes I might be using some lingo here. But yeah, the idea is that we are working with an emergent theory of change. And so there's many theories, and then there's really bona fide science as to what supports emergence. And one of those within complexity science is around constraints. So we want to steward three things in particular during the session. The first is the frame, which is exactly what you spoke about there, why they chose somatic coaching. So first of all, what is somatic coaching? What are their understandings of that? What are the shared expectations? The next is the focus, which is what Lottie, you spoke to as the want. So for those of you who haven't trained at the Somatic School yet, the want is basically the desired outcome for that specific session. Okay, so that's the focus. And then the last is the flow of the session, when to slow down, when to give an invitation for some sort of intervention, when to be in a kind of more conceptual self-awareness speaking space, when to drop into more kind of like experiencing space perhaps, and like your attunement to the client, and then stewarding the flow of the session in that regard. So those are very important, because all three of those will determine what happens within the session and what emerges. And importantly, as you say, Lottie, there, if clients circling around something, maybe the frame isn't mutually understood, or there's a clear set of shared intentions or expectations from the session. Maybe the want hasn't been clarified enough, or isn't actually compelling enough for the client to actually, for there to be any movement within the session towards that desired outcome. That might be experienced as a circling around the topic. And that frame around somatic coaching, if we feel that a client's circling a topic, maybe sort of seems to be somewhat not really in that kind of co-creative space where they're really participating in the session, which can also feel like a circling. Maybe there's something about checking in about what their original intention was for, as you say, Lottie, doing somatic coaching, and maybe doing this kind of coaching in the first place. So yeah, that's all good stuff. So and you said there, getting into the story. Yeah. Then this gives us something to go back to if they're getting into the story. Yeah. So especially if what we're talking about there is a lot of story, like it seems like a lot of talking, and actually there could be more embodied experience. So one thing on that, before I just come to some of the other comments in the chat, I'm probably going to end up saying this again and again at these coaching clinics. One thing that's very characteristic of coaching is that we work without an agenda. So free of an agenda. One thing what happens a lot as somatic coaches, and happens especially as we begin to bring the body into our coaching, and we're excited about it too, which naturally, and that's wonderful. I'm delighted if any of you are feeling excited about that or enthusiastic to start to do more embodied coaching. One thing that tends to happen in those situations, though, is that we start to kind of have this expectation that the clients will have embodied experiences, will go into the body, I'm going to do quotes here, out of the head and into the body. I do this because, of course, the head is our body. But, so out of the head, out of the thinking space and into the body, coaches will often have this desire to help a client do that. One thing we have to check ourselves out, especially as budding body-oriented coaches, is to what degree is that our agenda and to what degree is that us serving their desire? In other words, their client's agenda, essentially. Are we of service to the client because they have said explicitly and overtly, I want to have an embodied experience, I want to do somatic work here? Or have we got a new skill set that enables us to do that, and we want to use that, and also we believe in it? And that's the one particularly to watch out for. When we really believe in the power of it, the effectiveness of it, of course, those of you in the room, if you're here, you probably do. That's where we really have to check ourselves then, because that's when we can want it more than they want it for themselves, because we know it will work, it's going to be great. But if they don't want it for themselves, whose agenda is that? That's the question. Whose agenda is that? So just to throw that into the mix, because it's an important one. And we'll probably end up coming back to that. Okay, cool. Let me just check in briefly with you, Kirsty, who'd asked that question, and perhaps also and we'll come back to you, Vera, because you'd also asked a similar question. Yeah, how's all of this landing with you? What's resonating? What's left? What remains?
I can picture this particular client in my mind as you're talking, and I can very much see that she's light touch. She wants light touch embodiment in terms of, I think someone put it in the chat as well, there is, I think, a little bit of a fear of going there. There's a lot of intellectual analysis, someone mentioned. And it's really speaking to me about how I need to really remind her then, and just keep recontracting and asking her, is this what you want? Would you like us to go there now? Or would you prefer to just keep talking? Because although it's her intellectual analysis, it's not mine.
Beautiful, Kirsty. In body-oriented coaching, what you're describing there is what we call partnering. So really partnering with the client there. If you're noticing there's a bit of apprehension, checking in. A way to do that in a very, very open way is, I'm curious, what are you experiencing right now? Or how is this for you in this moment? If you ask the direct question, would you like to go into the body, that you might find so actually you might, I just thought that as I was speaking out loud. Yeah.
That's a really good point, actually, because that's probably just making her more fearful rather than when I'm actually saying that, no, I don't want to do that, thank you very much. Whereas actually just asking, being curious is allowing her already to kind of just consider how that's landing with her, how that's sitting.
Lovely.
And it would be a better way in. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. And Kirsty, in that moment, as you ask those questions, especially if they're more oriented to what are you noticing, what are you observing, what are you experiencing here in this moment, you're doing body-oriented coaching right there. As you do that, not as in that's how do I put this? That would be as you say, she's in a light touch space. That would be a light touch body-oriented coaching, because you're just inviting her to notice. That's called embodied self-awareness, the self-experiencing the self, our experience of ourselves. So yeah, lovely. Exactly. Great. Perfect. Okay, cool. Vera, just coming back to you, because I think I see now that you'd copied and pasted one of the questions that I think resonated with you. Okay, so, but how's this landing with you? Anything else that feels like needs more further integration? Or
Yeah, no, it is landing with me. I think the part you mentioned and being mindful of our agenda being superimposed on the session, I think is something that I try to keep at the forefront because as someone coming from the therapy space, that is kind of a dynamic where the expectation is the person comes in, has the agenda, or just the person is coming to me for advice or whatever, things like that. And so really shifting from that mindset, I think, is what I'm still getting practice in. And I think that is the biggest thing that um, makes me kind of, I guess, pause or get stunted when someone is circling. It's like, okay, what do I do kind of to get them out of the circling? And the other thing that came up as we were talking was like, oh, okay, something that might be helpful is just making a contact statement. So just naming um, what might be happening in the circling, and using that as an opportunity for them to maybe explore it from a different way. And I also like the example that you just gave of when you ask a question that is an embodied approach, it allows them to go in without directly saying it or asking them to, um, you know, um, yeah, go into their body. So, yeah, so thank you. All of this is really, really helpful.
Lovely. Thank you for sharing, Vera. Yeah. What I like about where this conversation is, how this conversation is unfolding, is we're really on the topic of something that I'm very fond of, which is the notion that within body integration, we're trying to have maximum impact with minimal intervention. And so I have a principle for that, which is do the least. And so the light touch, those open questions, just checking in about what somebody is experiencing in that moment, as we mentioned with Kirsty, is a lovely way to do that. Context statements is another lovely way to do the least there. That's a skill that we train on the course here, that's drawn from the Hakomi approach. And you spoke to something also really important there, Vera, which is characteristic in the coaching approach, something that's really characteristic or kind of sort of baked into the coaching approach. And this is why it lends itself so beautifully to somatic work, which is about agency and empowerment. So an advisory service tends to have, a dynamic. And I'm going to use the word power here. I know it's a charged word, but like a power dynamic within it. Now, when I say power dynamic, this is a consensual power. This is somebody who's opting into that setup. So that's a power dynamic that's understood, established, and agreed upon. Okay. In coaching, we have it's what often people describe it as a very egalitarian approach. It's a sort of much more of a flatter. It's much flatter. It's much more co-creative in the regard. But most importantly, within the coaching approach, we're really all about the client's empowerment, and that the client very much feels like they're the one who's leading the session. They're only going where they want to go. They're only doing what they want to do. They're only going as fast as they want to go. That sort of thing. Now, somebody asked here. Kavita. Is Kavita Golia here now? Kavita? Okay. So Kavita asked about, clients who are more vigilant, and that speaks a little bit to, I think, what Kirsty you'd said about like a sense of safety about going into the body. This is why that coaching approach is so important, that sense of agency, that sense of, when I say coaching approach, I mean, as body into coaching is both true to somatics and true to coaching. And the part of it that's true to coaching is to say, what do you want to do? Where should we go? Here's something we could do. How does that sound to you? And how is this for you now that we've started? And how about now? And you don't need to be excessive with it, but the attunement will guide you as to whether you need to ask a question like that. And the notion that the client's always kind of, I don't want to say in charge of the session, but definitely directing the session in a certain kind of way with your offerings and invitations included. But it's the client gets the final say ultimately. And it creates safety in the space. And that's going to, over time, help a client begin to feel more willing and ready to start to explore things that maybe previously were a little bit more daunting, checking in and sometimes just having embodied experiences for people in general is a bit of it, just because it feels foreign to bring movement, for example, into a session can feel quite daunting for someone who kind of keeps themselves very buttoned up and sat on their hands and that sort of thing. It can be quite daunting to do that. Cultural differences can factor into that too. So yeah, so the coaching approach there, I just really want to underline how important the coaching approach is with that agency piece. And how it kind of brings safety into the approach just by doing coaching and knowing that right now I'm coaching. And what that means is it's non-directive, non-advisory, person-centered, client-led, co-creative process of inquiry. Yeah. Anyone got any thoughts on that there? I think there are some other questions that sort of speak to that similar theme, but I just want to, I just want to check in about that one. Anyone else got any thoughts on that? Okay. Cynthia had said you love object feedback for when somebody's circling a topic, and that's another skill that we train on. Of course, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, and again, so Ollie was speaking to that notion about them not feeling safe to go there, so they're circling it. So again, it's about, only going the client feels ready to go. So in IFS, in internal family systems, there's a good line where they say something like, we only go as fast as the slowest part. I love that. We only go as fast as the slowest part. So how does that relate to body-oriented coaching? Essentially, we're going at the client's pace. And when the client is ready, we have the green light to go ahead, but not before that. Okay, cool. Let's read it. Yeah, cool. Great. Okay, so let's have a look at then some of the other questions then that are in here. I might just say could you put your virtual hand up if you submitted a question before the event? I see Fiona leaning in. I think you might have potentially. Sylvia, no. Okay, cool. Sylvia. Anyone else who's present who submitted a question beforehand? Okay, cool. So we've got a lot of people have banked their questions but haven't come to the event today. Sylvia, we're coming to you. A client who cannot define what they want, or their only want is to feel better or stop feeling anxious. Okay. What's the question around that, Sylvia? Give us a little bit more context on that one. And great. Okay, Fiona and Harriet. Yeah, great. Lovely. This is a good way to do it. We'll come back to you next then. Yeah.
So yeah, that's I'm encountering now that I'm doing a lot of sessions. It's something that I encounter a lot. They are so they want to get into their bodies, but they really can't name or frame what they expect out of it. Maybe they've been in therapy or they've tried talk-based approaches, and they hear about somatic. We have a conversation. We have an intake conversation where I explain how it works, and then they come to the session, and this is even I sense and I see that they get overwhelmed by even just put on the seat of having to say what they want, and they're like, I don't know, I just want to feel good. I just don't want to have panic attacks, or I'm just anxious. I want to stop being anxious. So it's I sometimes have difficulty. I mean, I already had it during the course a lot to fine tune the want. So when I'm finding now in like normal practice that it's very difficult when the client is in that state. So I'm having to take 10 steps back to start with regulation before we can even start to have a conversation, before they can even understand what it is that they want out of the work that we're doing together. Which is, yeah, sometimes I'm just following around, I'm following them, when they feel ready, what they want, and sometimes as they start to feel more regulated, then they are able to name something that they want, but then we are so stuck because it usually comes at the end of the session. So yeah, it's that's the difficulty. That's the question I wanted to submit to see what is the perspective that others in the group can offer.
Yeah, great, lovely. Okay, cool. I've dropped Sylvia's question into the chat there. Thank you, Sylvia, for adding a bit of a context to that too. Anyone got any thoughts on that before? Yeah, and I'll chime in here and there. Yeah, Anita, go for it.
I think Sylvia says something like they might just say that they want to feel good. So I might try to open that up a bit by asking, so what would good look like? And then when they talk about that, maybe pull out words and then maybe ask what that would feel like. So kind of just get a understanding of more of what that means, that one word they've used, and hopefully pull something out of that with them.
Nice, Anita. Lovely. Great. Anyone else? Thank you, Anita. Anyone else on this one? I was thinking along very much the same lines as Sylvia. Feel free to jump in, by the way, if anyone. So I don't want to cut anyone off. Okay, cool. I was thinking along very much the same lines as Anita there, Sylvia, in terms of, clients, got a classic situation there where they're clear what they want to move away from. The question is what they're moving towards. A want, a desire is everything, even sort of small single cell organisms have this kind of approach avoidance responses. Cells in our bodies do the same thing. So it's like, there's this is very fundamental. Okay, so we've got the avoidance part, stop feeling anxious, and what's the approach? That's the desiring, the want. Yeah. So yeah, really kind of there's a number of questions. I think I made some notes actually, Sylvia, on your question before about what does better mean, or what might that look like, as Anita says. The question as well is when the person who wants to stop feeling anxious. This sounds like a strange question. I wouldn't ask it like this, but inquiring around why, like for what purpose, for what reason. Like that's a strange question to ask. Of course, because it feels terrible, they might say. Okay. So if they keep coming back with things like that, then I guess it's almost like, what would feel better, what would feel better, what would feeling better look like? I've never felt better. And then if you get into things like this, it could get difficult. But I think if you keep asking these questions that just sort of open up, we're kind of trying to open up, in a way. Often when you have someone like that, you feel that you it's akin a little bit to the circling, because you're stuck a bit with that. But often those are well-worn grooves. Even the narrative is something that they've sort of shared again and again. So in a way, what we're trying to do is like create some new neural pathways. And in order to do that, we might have to go and like kind of trot. Let's see if we can get a different metaphor. We might have to they might be very familiar with that path and feel confident going down that path of I just want to feel better, or I want to feel less anxious. So we might have to be kind of reassure them that coming in a different path may be fruitful in some way too. And so questions like what would feel better look like, how might that look for you, how might that feel, and then remember this notion of like embodied visioning, okay, so, and sparkle hunting, okay, so getting disproportionately curious about whatever they say that brings a sparkle to their eye. So essentially, or lights them up or something. So essentially, as they start to speak to something that's more nourishing, more resourcing, more integrating, more cohering for them, it's just to really jump on that, trend all your curiosity towards that. So you just ask them to say a bit more about X. So just expand on, there's a little glimmer of light, and you're just going to ask questions about that little glimmer until it illuminates more and more of what's currently kind of concealed in darkness, but it's in there. We just got to kind of just keep asking questions about that to expand it up a bit more. And so how is that embodied? Because in body-oriented coaching, we're tracking non-verbal communication in order to trend our curiosity there. So it's actually not just what they say, it's when the furrowed brow eases in a moment that they say something, well, that's something to get curious about. As they smile a little bit, as they say something else, get curious about that. Those moments are we get curious there, not about the smile, not about the furrowed brow. That's not what we're getting curious about. We're getting curious about whatever they were talking about in that moment, in this instance. Yeah, in terms of sparkle hunting. Yeah. Sylvia, just maybe coming back. Actually, let's just check in the chat before I come back to you, Sylvia. So Lucy says she likes the question in the handout for the one question, and what would that give you, and what is getting in the way of that? Maybe contact statement. I think that was related, Sarah, to Sylvia's. And thank you, Elena's shared a little bit what about contact statement is. and a smart filter Ildiko offers there for scaling up might help too. Yeah. Oh, and Ollie says getting them to remember a time where they felt less anxious. Expand on what that felt like too. So yeah, have you ever felt a different way to that? And what was that? You know, when, or to ask it in a more open way, when was the time that you felt less anxious? Otherwise, you end up in the same situation as Kirsty. You know, and they kind of close off the possibility of that opening up. Kirsty or Christy? I've lost you on the screen, so I can't check. Anyway, Sylvia, coming back to you just to check in on that. Kirsty, yeah, see you there. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really, really useful. And this is something I guess my question came from one particular client that it's just can't, she's very stuck. And because I have this across the board with most of my clients that they're like, would you suddenly ask them, and what would you like out of the session? They're like deer in headlights, like, what do you mean? Do I have to want something? Are you not supposed to be here to help me? So yeah, I think some of them get it, but there is one specific client that is just incapable. So maybe, and sometimes when we do get, like, I do try sometimes these questions, like, how would that, like, what is getting on the way, or what would that look like, and how would that feel, and things like that. What I have is tears, a lot of tears, so we have to regulate down, and I guess we're really slow, and that's most of the session, which is just on tears, and we regulate, and when we come back and we regulate, so we never really get to close the session. And since we don't have I want to work towards the session, my role there is just to hold the space for her in whatever way. And this is why I guess my question was coming from, like, how can I still hold the space for her and still be a resource, and sparkle hunts and all of that, but still allow for the release when she needs it. Yeah, but this is very useful. Like, it just,
Yeah.
it's a way of framing the questions. It doesn't have to be anything specific. You can still follow the path without having to get too specific about the outcome that is expected from the session.
Yeah. And Sylvia, it sounds like you're doing great work there. I mean, the fact that you're doing little by little and moving towards that, I wouldn't underestimate what that's doing for that person's ability to connect with their want and their desire, and opening that up there. So you'll know if there's kind of feels like there's progress there, and it's, importantly, she or he, I'm not sure, they will know, or they will know, especially. So you might check in with the client about this topic, as well. Like, how is your relationship to the one feel like it's changed over the time that we've been working with, if at all? Like, what are you noticing is different now to when you first came in? Maybe that will give you some insights into where they are in that process. Someone else actually shared a very similar question. Bonnie Bishop, she said, how to work with the want for the session and for the work together when the client is saying they're uncertain or hazy about the goal, or maybe the goal they name doesn't seem to bring aliveness. So it's a similar question, and I'm only bringing this just because if Bonnie is here, then we'll kind of fold that into this one too. But my feeling is actually, I know this is a bit of a radical point of view. Okay, take what you like, leave the rest, and believe me, you do not need to kind of take this wholesale. I have a strange feeling that everyone actually does know what they want at some level. I think sometimes we might not know about the specific details, but I think especially if somebody knows what they don't want, and it's just on the other side of that, every stick has two ends, and on the other side of that is what they want as well. And I think a lot of the time what blocks people to getting to their want tends to be, sometimes it's even kind of almost like permission to even have that desire in the first place. For example, one thing you can do to get around this, and this is not I know it sounds strange to say to get around this, but I guess what I mean is, if somebody's really struggling there, it's not exactly it's not a body-oriented coaching skill, but the miracle question. Anyone heard of the miracle coach question? Comes from solution-focused coaching, I think. By show of hands, anyone heard of it? No? Okay, cool. So a few of you have. So the way it works is you just say to the person, it works very well. I actually did it with my sister recently. We weren't coaching, of course, but I just said, try this. She said, I don't know what she wants. So what you say is, okay, imagine it's a sort of a visualization, which we don't tend to do much in body oriented coaching either, but this is how it works. You say, like, if you were, say, imagine you were to go to sleep tonight, and in the middle of the night, a miracle occurs. And when you wake up in the morning, your life is exactly as you'd want it to be. It's just the ideal. Everything is nothing. It couldn't be better. It could possibly be better. You have everything you could possibly want in your life in terms of your, or another way of putting that is your life looks exactly as you'd hope and dream it could, something like that. Yeah. And then you say, what are you seeing, hearing, feeling, experiencing? Kind of go through that. You can break those down. You can, and each time a client goes into, when they're answering this question, the thing I notice that especially when clients respond to this is quite often they'll veer into the present moment, and whether that's possible or not possible, and their various blocks in their life right now towards that. So we just say, no, we should remind them a miracle has happened. You have it. So don't worry about that right now. Just tell me what you're seeing. Tell me what you're experiencing. What are you hearing? And then the more they talk about it, the more clarity they get on exactly what they want. And it's amazing, because actually, for somebody who says, I have not a clue, like my sister said the other day, no idea, we did the miracle question. It was crystal clear, crystal clear. From there, we could get more embodied with that. From a miracle question could be interesting. You can expand that into a constellation afterwards, taking elements of the experience and making a constellation about that. You could also do the embodying skill to really fully inhabit that experience that they've described, or who they are within that experience. And they can actually take on the shape of that, the posture of that, or even the feeling of it. They could just shape their body into a way that seems to feel. That's a skill on the course called embodying. You could try some contrast, some transitioning with that as well. But yeah, that's one way that you can have that become more somatic following doing a miracle question. Okie dokes. I think there's loads of lovely offerings in the chat as well. So I encourage you, Sylvia, especially to have a look at those, and everyone else who's curious. In the meantime, Fiona or Harriet, do you remember who raised hand first? Who wants to? Fiona, cool. Coming to you, Fiona. Thank you, Harriet, for being so gracious. Yeah, what was your question here? Maybe I can find it.
I'm happy to shout out about it. I was just asking about how do you, as the coach, when you are, because I've just started practicing, and when you sense something and you see something emerging, you name it, maybe the person's feeling, or maybe it's a feeling of grief, or so you get a sense of what is about what's coming up, and if they don't articulate it, and I find as I'm sitting there, I'm kind of almost willing, like, yeah. It's almost like, yeah, you can see it, and then it does, and then how do you manage that in yourself? And I get that you were talking earlier about, the clients, they have agency and follow their process and their lead, but how do you actually just manage that in yourself and try and stay present and not get caught up in kind of almost willing them to name the thing that you're seeing? Yeah, just how do you actually manage that in the moment? Even though practically, technically, and theoretically what you should be doing, is how do you actually handle that?
So this speaks to something. So I love what you said there about wanting to really honor the agency of the client, have the client be really leading. In body oriented coaching, we have kind of, I call this, what you're speaking to, I call this a second conversation. And so to me, this isn't taking a client necessarily where they haven't chosen to go. It's as if they're expressing one thing verbally to you, and then non-verbally they're expressing something else. And they may match, they may be contradictory. The point is, though, they are communicating either way. One is a verbal communication, the other is non-verbal communication. And in the body integrated skill set, we have we have skills to respond to the second conversation in a way. So regardless of what's being spoken verbally, you can respond directly to what the body is communicating in that moment. So you choose which conversation in a way you're responding to, but both for the client sharing with you. So are you in the training, Fiona, at the Somatic School? Yeah. Where are you in the training? What module? Or have you completed it?
We've just completed module 3.
Okay, cool. Basically, in the next module, you're going to do something called contact statements. And essentially, that skill is the answer to your question, or an answer. It's an option to do in that moment. You'll have exactly, in my opinion, it sounds to me, and I might correct, it sounds to me what you're looking for is how do you somehow help a client become aware of an experience they're having that they're not either consciously aware of or not sort of speaking to directly, but it's sort of really caught your attention and it seems to be very present and alive in the space. Is that right, Fiona?
Yeah, without leading it, without actually steering them or influencing, and you just actually really just let it emerge, without or also the sense of feeling like you're doing a good job and you're doing a good job in the session for the client. How do you actually reconcile that in yourself, I suppose?
That sounds to me like they're sort of related, but they sound like two separate things. For the first part, it sounds like the contacting will really help with that, because it's gentle, it's inviting, and it's very minimal. You don't do much, but it can potentially help a client have the kind of an invitation to explore, say, for example, the grief or whatever it might be in that moment. The piece about like you doing a good job, kind of run out of time to talk about today, though. But I think the question is, and it's a big topic, but I think this is a good one. Maybe if you come to the next one, Fiona, we could talk about it. But basically, the question is, where does our value as a body-oriented coach, especially in body-oriented coaching, come from? And I think for now, just to leave you with something, how do I say that in just a few words? If you create conditions if you are able to create the conditions for their process to unfold, that might sound all a bit abstract, then I think that's really that's really where the value comes from. And so if what wants to emerge is grief, and you are able to create space for that to express itself, and for them to be able to engage with that in a way where they're patient, attentive, curious, and kind towards their experience without becoming dysregulated or disoriented, then I think you're doing amazing work there, because the system will self-organize under those conditions, so that's anyway, more on that next time, I think. Fiona. Harriet, I'm so sorry, we basically run out of time. What your question though, let me see, because I'll pin it for next time.
I had a couple of questions, but some of them linked to what was already discussed at the start.
Yes, I thought so. That's what I made a note about, actually. So it is very related to the thing at the start. I said here in my notes around your question, it's unlikely to be that the body itself is blocking as much as maybe something needs attention first. So just a quick flash there thing. Have you done module 2 yet?
Yes. I'm in the same cohort as Fiona. They were just
whatever it seems to be blocking, I would turn towards that with this kind of loving attention to acknowledge that, engage with that, relate to that. Have you tried that? Yeah.
So it was mainly other people. So it was like the system or something bigger than them that they can't control. And it seemed, it was in multiple situations as well, that it was things out of their control that they couldn't influence, like a decision from someone else or
Interesting. Well, thank you, Harriet. Okay, one for next time then, I guess.
Okay.
Or maybe or we could speak on Circle. And feel free to message me on Circle and I can pick that one up. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. We've come to the top of the hour. I'd like to say for those of you, thank you everyone for coming. It was great. For those of you who are new to the Somatic School, you might be thinking there's lots of language that we're using and you're thinking, what are you talking about? I would like to learn how to do those skills. First step would be perhaps to come along to one of our free introduction to body oriented coaching events. I've dropped the link for that in the chat. So you can come along to one of those free events. It would be a good way, at least it's a good start for you. And then if you have been to one of those intro events and you're thinking about joining us, then here is the link to book a call with one of our course consultants, and they can have a chat with you about enrolling or finding a date and that works for you. In the meantime, I'd love to invite those of you who are dropping off now to maybe share in the chat what you're leaving here with. I'm leaving here with, and maybe we'll take a few unmutes as well. I'm leaving here with. You can just share a bit of, Sylvia says clarity, and yeah, anyone want to unmute and share? It's nice to hear some voices before we close here, if you like. Okay, great.
I'm leaving here. Oh,
yeah, go for it, Lisa.
I was going to say I'm leaving here with some validation and some. It was nice to be able to apply some of what I've just learned. I've just finished the modules, and yeah, it's fantastic. Highly recommend it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for jumping in here. Nice to hear your voice. For the sake of time, because I know we've run over, I'll just read from the chat. And Lottie, community is everything. Lovely. Lottie, Vera, I'm leaving here with gratitude. And Kirsty, I'm leaving here feeling reassured and curious to learn more about courses. Beautiful. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This was great. This was fab. First time doing the Coach Clinic. I look forward to seeing you next time. We'll do it monthly. So yeah, many more opportunities to get your questions answered. Harriet, we'll start with you next time. Ciao for now. Bye, everyone. Take care.